In this video, we're going to focus on the second sign of the Bethlehem star narrative. And the second sign revolves around the conception of John the Baptist. Just to remind ourselves, we had reviewed the first sign, which was this Jupiter in Aquarius. And this Jupiter in Aquarius was happening on Wednesday, March the 12th, 8 BCE, Nisan 1. And the Aquarius is a water bearer. So you can see it's a gentleman pouring water out of his bucket. And it comes just before Pisces, which is the place of many waters. And these phrases come out of the Balaam narrative in Numbers 24:7, where it says, "He shall pour the water out of his buckets," while Balaam is in a trance, receiving a vision of God, and God is controlling what he says. And when we get to 8 BC, Nisan 1, we find Jupiter here. And we already know, or should know by now, that the 12 original constellations are very ancient, and the figures that represent each constellation is of ancient origin. And I surmise that because they're all of such a biblical nature, that they were, much like the Bible, God breathed. The death of the children in Bethlehem, being March 13, 4 BC, is precisely 4 years from this date here. Now, the course of Abia is given to us in Luke chapter 1, verse 5, telling us that Zacharias was the priest who had received the lot to offer the incense, and he was of the course of Abia. Now we can look in 1 Chronicles 24:10 to find out when is the course of Abia. And we find that the course of Abia is the 8th week. And when we come down to the end of the listing, there's 24 weeks. And then the 24 weeks would repeat again. However, when you get to the pilgrimage festival weeks, all the priests would serve together on those weeks. Those weeks were not allotted to a particular family course. So the course is occupied 2 sets of 24, which is 48 weeks, and then the 3 pilgrimage weeks totals 51. And then you had 1 extra week, which would be occupied by course number 1 again. So you get to 24, and then you just go back to course 1. So course 1 would handle the 52nd week. Now, he might have started on the first week of the year, and then when the whole cycle restarts again, that first course is serving the 52nd week of the year. And of course, as you cycle through the next year, he might be serving the 51st week of the year, and so on. So the courses would stay in order. There would be they don't fill in the week. They're not trying to always have the first course serve the first week of the first month of the year. The courses are not, the program is not to keep the courses within a certain season. The program is to keep the courses in their order. And we see that here when we read verse 19, that these were the orderings of them in their service to come into the house of the Lord according to their manner. They had an order, a pattern, and it was important so that they always had equal time, that pattern never changed. They're not trying to stick to a season. And so this poses a problem because you never know where the 8th course is going to land on the calendar. It could be spring. In some other year, it could be the fall, because the 8th course would just keep migrating around the seasons. In the 8th year of BC, starting from Nisan 1 that year. So you're starting with the first course occupying the first week of the first month, which would be sort of like the natural, logical place to start. But what I'm trying to tell you is that the fact that that is where it starts and where it works out, where you find the signs, is in itself ordained, because it didn't have to be that way. And as you can imagine, it would be difficult to calculate or determine um, where the eighth course fell on the calendar in this particular year, because you'd have to go all the way back to the beginning of when the priestly service began, and you'd have to know what year that was, and you would need to know how to go through all the iterations to map out where the eighth course was falling year after year after year after year after year, and then come to this particular year and understand, okay, where did it fall this particular year? But I think God ordained it so that it would actually fall nice and neatly. The first course handled the first week of the first month in that year, 8 BC, precisely when Jupiter was in Aquarius, fulfilling the verse in Balaam's narrative. And there's, in a sense, what we're going to see when we look at this particular sign, there's a confirmation that we're on the right track, and we're gonna look at that. The lamps were lit in the evening, twilight, and the incense upon it. They were also lit in the morning as well. Now, there's another important point that we need to know structurally before we look at the chart of the course of Abia. The priests, you can see here, this is from a Jewish encyclopedia, that the outgoing mishmar, priests, would offer the morning sacrifice, but the incoming would offer the evening sacrifice. And so we're talking about going out and coming in on the Sabbath. This might be the only verse that helps to describe this. It's in 2 Chronicles chapter 23, verse 8. And this is not something that I've ever seen much of. I don't know if I've ever seen it when people draw up the course of Abia charting out the weeks. They don't seem to understand. They just put course of Abia week 8. Because if you're coming in on a Saturday evening and going out on a Saturday morning, then your week 8 occupies 2 different Sabbath days. One, the evening of one Sabbath day, and then the morning of the following Sabbath day. And so it's important when you're charting it out that you chart it precisely as they conducted their services. And so we see here, so the Levites and all Judah did according to all things that Jehoiada the priest had commanded. And he took every man his men that were to come in on the Sabbath with them that were to go out on the Sabbath. For Jehoiada the priest dismissed not the courses. And so this is telling us that an example of how those coming in were there in the evening, and those going out were dealing with the morning. What had happened is he hadn't dismissed the morning, and so when the evening priests came in, they could all meet together. They met each other, took every man his men, because he had not dismissed the morning priests. So again, from the Jewish encyclopedia, that on the pilgrimage festivals, all the watches shared equal status, and so they didn't allot the pilgrimage festival weeks to any particular course. I'm going to show you all of the solar eclipse that are part of the Bethlehem story narrative. And the first 2 relate to the course of Abia. And this is how we know that we started in the right place. As you can see, on the left-hand side in red, you have a solar eclipse on May 10th, November the 2nd, April 29 of 7 BC, October 23rd, of 7 BCE and April the 18th of 6 BCE. And the first two are in 8 BCE, May 10 and November 2nd. And the May 10 and the November 2nd turns out, once you chart the course, that those are both course of Abia days. And so the eclipse, it's not unusual for there to be two solar eclipses in the same year, but it is pretty unusual that both of them actually land on his course weeks. And so that gives you a little bit of pause. It's like, well, that's a coincidence, you know? And that's all there was in that year, just those two. And both of those two land on a course of Abia week. This is the charting of a course of Abia. As you can see, there's a new moon on March the 12th. It's right here in this top corner. And on the top left-hand side, it's divided into two sections because it's the first 24 weeks, and then it continues to be on to the second 24 weeks. And where I have the yellow highlighted with the outline, there's no week numbers in those boxes because you have Passover and then Feast of Unleavened Bread. That's the first one. And then you have the Feast of Weeks is the second one. And then the Feast of Tabernacles, the third. There's no course numbers allotted to those weeks. And the course number 1 is the morning, where they would go out. And the course number 2 is the evening, where they would come in. And there's a column for the Saturday, the Sabbath day. It's March 15. And this is 8 BCE, new moon, Wednesday, March 12th, the first of Nisan. And then the second week, and you can see in red, I have the week numbers. So week 1, week 2, week 3, etc. But say, for example, if you're looking at week 3, that means the course number 3 goes out of the Sabbath on that day, and course number 4 comes in on the Sabbath. And that's what I'm calling week 3. Okay, it's two different courses occupying the Sabbath in one week. And so when you get down to week number 7, you can see it says May the 3rd is the Saturday. Number 7 leaves, and number 8 comes in Saturday evening on the week number 7. And then week number 8, it's a Saturday morning where course number 8 leaves on May 10th. Now, on May 10th, there's a solar eclipse that occurs on that day. And so we take a look at it just to see what it looks like. And was it visible from Jerusalem? Was it anywhere even close to Jerusalem? Because the signs have to have either visibility, or sometimes they're just hours after sunset. So as you can see here, when you're looking at the May 10, there's no eclipse is visible from Jerusalem. So it happens, but you can see its area of visibility, and of course it's nowhere near Jerusalem. So as you look at this eclipse, I want you to notice that it's happening at 10:57 in the morning. So this is a morning eclipse. This is what it looks like. If you're over Jerusalem, it just looks like a new moon. There's no actual eclipse that shows up. It's just a new moon. You can see here that the Sabbath is May 10, and the new moon, right, column, is May 10 as well. And then as we go down, you come to the Feast of Trumpets, and that's just a single day, so it's not the whole week festival. And then there's the day or two of atonement, and then you come to the week of tabernacles that begins on the Nisan 15, Tishri 15, and then the weeks continue. There was week 24 leaves on the September the 6th, and week number 1 came in on September the 6th, and so on. And then we get all the way down to week 7 again, where week 7 leaves on the Saturday, November the 1. And week 8 comes in on Saturday, November the 1, the course of Abia. And so then we notice that the solar eclipse is on November 2. So on the second day, he starts on November 1, so the second day would be Sunday night, November 2. That is the evening in which the solar eclipse takes place, in which Zacharias is serving in the temple and is lighting the incense at sunset. His lot was to burn incense in Luke 1, verse 9 and 11. And there appeared unto him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense. Right? So the verse, it's not by just coincidence, but the verses are very clearly giving you time frames. You can place the angel Gabriel at the altar of incense at the sunset. And that's really important, because you're getting time frames, and now you can map those time frames out. So we have a sunset at 1714, which is 5:14, burning of incense, Gabriel arrives. And then we have a solar eclipse at 1857, which is 6:57 p.m. And I'm discerning that that's when Gabriel leaves, and I'll show you why. Because on that Sunday evening, you can take the difference from 5:14 p.m. to 6:57 p.m. And that amount of time is 1 hour and 43 minutes. And it's interesting that when you go to look at the length of time that the solar eclipse lasts. Now, solar eclipses don't last for 1 hour and 43 minutes. But let's go see how long it lasts. This is what the solar eclipse looks like. You can see it comes down from North America and it swings across to northern Africa. So it does, of course, is close to Israel. So it's going to go through northern Africa and out the other side, and Israel's going to see it. So we have this verse in Luke chapter 1, verses 10 and 21, that the whole multitude of the people were praying without at the time of incense. And the people waited for Zacharias, and they marveled that he tarried so long in the temple. So they're there at the lighting of the incense waiting. At that same time, Gabriel visits, and then it's 1 hour and 43 minutes before the eclipse occurs. And then, so let's take a look at this eclipse. So here it is on the second line, November the 2nd. And if you go all the way across, you'll see that the length of time for the eclipse is 1 minute and 40 seconds. And so it's just very interesting that the time frame of the eclipse is 1 hour and 43 minutes from sunset to the eclipse. And the eclipse, which you can see, eclipse can have a wide-ranging number of minutes. You see all the way up to five minutes here, and down to 1 minute and 9 seconds. I've seen smaller than that. So that the length of time an eclipse can last varies widely, right? And here it is, that this particular one is closely aligned, 1 minute and 40 seconds, closely aligned to the 1 hour and 43 minutes. That would be the sunset to the eclipse. And so these things are not just a coincidence. When you've established the starting year, you've established the correct method in which they came in and went out on their weeks of service, you've established that they don't use any of the course weeks during the festivals, and then you've located the only two possible eclipses that are happening on the weeks that you've determined Zacharias is serving. The first one is a morning, and maybe they're not likely to be waiting in the morning because the morning is a sunrise at 6 in the morning, and they're more likely to be waiting in the evening. It turns out that the time frame is sort of a prophetic. One is minutes and seconds, and the other's hours and minutes. But that's the way God's prophetic times work, right? You multiply by 10, or you multiply by 100, or you multiply by 1,000. And in this case, it's 1 minute and 40 seconds versus 1 hour and 43 minutes. And no, they're not perfectly exact, but it's still quite unusual how similar they are, especially with respect to the fact that in the verse, it's deliberately telling you that the people are waiting for what would be an inordinate amount of time. So if you want to know, how long were they waiting for? Well, chances are they were waiting for 1 hour and 43 minutes, which would be considerably more time than it normally takes. I would suggest it wouldn't take much more than 20 minutes that he would be in there. And if he was in a hurry, it could be less. So we're talking 5 times the amount of time that it normally would be. And so, nevertheless, the solar eclipse is happening on his course week. And what we're noticing is that every single verse in the narrative that has any relationship to a time frame, it's explained in the signs. There's no time frame that you can find in the biblical narrative that does not have a corresponding sign. And here's where it says in Exodus 29, verse 42 and 43, they offer in verse 39, the one lamb is offered in the morning, and the other lamb is offered at the evening. It's a continual burnt offering for all your generations. And at this, then it says in verse 42, where I will meet you to speak there unto you, and there I will meet with the children of Israel. So this is exactly what's happening. The promise is that he would meet them at the evening, at these animal sacrifice, lamb sacrifice, the daily sacrifice times, and incense burning times. And so the children of Israel gather to meet with God, or to meet with the priest to hear what God had said. And on this particular night, it takes them, they have to have a considerably long, marvelous amount of waiting time. And so that is effectively the purpose of the course of Abia information is designed to enable us that all the ingredients that are necessary to know how to build a course of Abia chart accurately are provided in the Bible. And all you need to do is have it charted correctly. And then we just look at when the eclipses were, and lo and behold, they fall right on the correct weeks. But the way people normally do this is that they don't have the morning and the evening going out and coming in. And so if you didn't have that, you might be tempted, where I have week number 7 during the first 24, you might not have that as a course of Abia on the evening of week 7. You would have him just listed on week 8, right? And and in that case, it's fine because it's week 8 and it's course 8. And you might say, okay, that's accurate. But really, it's the one on the right. It says week 7, but his course started that Saturday night, so he's there on on week 7. And if you were doing it in an inaccurate way, you wouldn't have him there on the Sunday night. You would be down to where it says week number 8. You would have it laid out incorrectly, and so you'd be missing a week. So the fact that they're there 2 Saturdays gives you 4 possible days, 4 possible Saturdays, anyway. And of course, it turns out it's a Sunday night. Again, Gabriel comes to visit Mary, right? And the fact that we are noticing that there's 2 solar eclipses, and one of them is when Gabriel's visiting. So it kind of gives you a clue that when Gabriel visits Mary, there's probably going to be another solar eclipse. And lo and behold, yes, on April 29, which is exactly 30 days before Jesus is conceived, there's another solar eclipse when Gabriel visits Mary. And it turns out, just like the verse says, Elizabeth is now within her 6th month. She's working on her 6th month of pregnancy, which when we look at the dates, you'll see April 29 is she's begun her 6th month, you know, at this date. And so the solar eclipse are happening when Gabriel visits, the angel Gabriel visits. And it gives you a clue then, because you can go into Daniel and see how you can see there's other times when Gabriel visits. And so the question is, if you knew when to look, would you find solar eclipse occurring when Gabriel visits Daniel and be able to determine what that date is, what those dates are? And the next solar eclipse is October 23rd, and we're going to see that solar eclipse goes right through like the Middle East. So it's a total solar eclipse, and it's going to be very visible to the wise men. And finally, you're going to have another solar eclipse, April the 18th, which is day 44 after Jesus is born. And so it's this day 44 in the narrative when they go to present him in the temple. The earliest you can present in the temple is day 40, right? So this happens to be day 44. And there's another solar eclipse, and this is a very special solar eclipse that represents the moment Jesus is met by the priest in the temple presentation of the male boys